If you ever say the words Final Fight to a Capcom fan, immediately they'll start thinking of the classic beat-em-up arcade, well, Final Fight. And of course, the sequels, the spin-offs, the characters that later have been added into Street Fighter. I can honestly go on about that myself. But today, this video is actually, in a way, talking about Final Fight itself, or rather, in its somewhat semi-forgotten state. And the reason that I say this is that while a majority of this has basically been a part of Street Fighter later on in the years ahead since its first initial debut, it basically was at a time its own thing. But this isn't technically the first time that it actually was like that. So, let's dive into that. So like I was talking literally a few seconds ago, but initially, Final Fight was originally called Street Fighter 89, and yes, it would have served as somewhat a proper sequel to the first Street Fighter game, which is the one where you play as Ken or Ryu if you face against, all the people all over the world, and Sagat was the final boss, and vice versa. However, since Street Fighter 1 didn't exactly did too well in the arcades, Capcom then decided to change this into what we know it as today as Final Fight. And it became one of the most successful beat-em-up games that Capcom has ever published. And, well, there's a lot to really talk about this, with the characters that later become added into the Street Fighter series, while one of them ended up being in Marvel vs. Capcom. And there are multiple ways that you can actually play the first Final Fight game. For the arcade port, you get to see it in Capcom Classic Collections, Beat 'em Up Bundle, Arcade Stadium, Final Fight Streetwise, and of course Street Fighter 6 with currently. Then of course there was again multiple versions of Final Fight 1, in which you can only play as Cody and Hagar in the Super Nintendo version, and a few particular differences you might see here, including also a Final Fight Guy special, I want to say special edition, where you can only play as Guy in the Super Nintendo. And oh no, that doesn't exactly stop right there. They also had it released on the Sega CD, with also a couple exclusive modes where you can basically play Score Attack, and of course, in this particular mode, you also have unique soundtracks or an original soundtrack accompanying to the Sega CD, and of course, a mode where you can basically beat up all the Mad Gear gang with exclusive stages and essentially just say, I beat more Mad Gear gang members than you. Then of course there was the famous Final Fight Double Impact, which later added with another game. I probably will add it in the subtext here, probably sadly because I forgot the name of it. But yeah, it came included with this particular game, and of course it also came along with a remix original soundtrack as well. It also came with a gallery mode as well. And if you were able to complete a lot of the challenges, you were able to watch literally a cartoon episode from the Street Fighter series. This one in particular.
If you know what's good for you and for your girlfriend, you'll do exactly what I tell you, Cody.
Cody, no!
You hurt my testicle!
Classic. Anyway, if you go to World Tour mode, you can find this little arcade cabinet in Metro City where you can play the first Final Fight game. Or you can go to the Battle Hub and go play at the Game Center where you can play the first Final Fight game and a couple of other Capcom classics with free play available, and also 1cc credit runs if you're into that kind of thing. And if you bought the Final Fight Battle Pass along with getting the Hagar and Sodom costume pieces, you could own Final Fight as well. That's cool though. It's pretty neat. So, I should probably mention the sequels, right? Or rather, the characters from the game. So, first up is Maki, who made her first debut, technically, in Capcom vs. SNK 2, but then was later added in Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max with Eagle and Yoon from that game, respectively. Ironically, Carlos never really got anything until Street Fighter 6, when he ended up being a non-playable character. He has his own theme, and honestly, kind of a little sad that he's not a playable character, but I gotta admit, the dude looks really cool after all these years since he's been stuck in Final Fight 2 Purgatory. I really think this looks really cool. Like, look at him! I really like the vibe of this guy. But yeah, that's pretty much where that kind of leads up to. And now we go to Final Fight 3. Particularly, while Guy and Hagar are basically back with a new character, Dean, Lucia from that game was then later added into Street Fighter V. Also pretty cool. Alright, I probably should also mention that yes, later on we did get Abigail, Poison, Cody, Sodom, Rolento, and then Hugo in the much later entries of Street Fighter, respectively with Street Fighter Alpha 1, 2, and 3, and then Street Fighter 2nd Impact and 3rd Strike. But it's interesting to see that almost the majority of Final Fight characters have introduced themselves into the world of Street Fighter. And to be honest, it is kind of sad in its own way that later on that Final Fight sort of became, I guess in its own way, like a mini game within the Street Fighter universe. And to be fair, this isn't technically the only Capcom game that sort of decided to tie itself into the Street Fighter universe. Then other beat-em-up series like Streets of Rage and TMNT ended up getting new games much years later. With the fact that we now got Streets of Rage 4 and TMNT Shredder's Revenge made by the same company. And mind you, there's also another Streets of Rage game being developed by the same people who made Mighty Fight Federation. And if you don't know what that is, you can take a look at this while you're also looking at the fact there is literally a survival mode in Streets of Rage 4. Also, TMNT has this too. That's the thing that I kind of wish that Final Fight, or at least Capcom, can really do for a new entry for a Final Fight game. Because they could really do something very similar to this, and I honestly would be on board with that. Because they did technically something similar with the Sega CD version of Final Fight 1. And honestly, it would really be cool to play all the classic characters and even like, I guess, the pixelated versions of Cody, Guy, Hagar, even pixelated Carlos, Maki, and Lucia. All of those characters, and then you get to do like a survival mode. Meanwhile, you get to see new versions of the characters, see a new story, and see something expanded instead of just, oh yeah, like if you want to see something new for Final Fight, it had to basically be within the story of Street Fighter 6 or something. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the Street Fighter series, but honestly, I just wish that Final Fight could easily do its story without really necessarily be in tangent with a Street Fighter plot entirely. Like, I get it, they work together with Street Fighter and they're part of Street Fighter, but they were something completely before Street Fighter, or at least before they were a part of Street Fighter entirely. You know, I feel like I'm forgetting something. Like, I know that there's been multiple versions of Final Fight 1 and been multiple ways to play it, but I feel like there was one version where you can just play it on the go and basically take it anywhere you want to. Wait a minute, the Game Boy Advance version, of course. Ironically, the name of the Game Boy Advance version of Final Fight 1 is Final Fight 1. Except in this particular version, you actually have dialogue between any of the characters that you're chosen, meaning the original 3 against the bosses. But you also get to play as the Alpha version, so meaning there's Alpha Cody with the handcuffs and Alpha Guy, meaning he has a few particular extra moves and a couple of, well, unique features that is extremely different compared to their previous iterations. It's really a fun game, and I hope this would end up being in NSO at some point. So what exactly is my main objective here? The thing is, Final Fight used to be its own standalone, well, particular franchise. That is until when it decided to merge within the Street Fighter Alpha series, when it introduced Guy, then later on Rolento, Sodom, and Cody, and then the rest. Eventually, in the more later years for Street Fighter, they ended up having not really much anything, like not even a new game. Then you got games like literally Streets of Rage and TMNT, where surprisingly years later, they get sequels or even just new games entirely. In fact, Streets of Rage is actually getting another game made by the dudes who literally made Mighty Fight Federation. And that game is basically a fighting game, but in the format of like, well, some people call it like a Super Smash Bros. Thing, but to me, it is very reminiscent of Power Stone. And honestly, it's even kind of sad to see that with Capcom, they haven't really given much thought to even consider thinking about, hey, we get it. There's a Capcom beat 'em up bundle. There's already Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, the Capcom Fighting Collection. I honestly think just because for this particular series alone, it really does deserve to be able to have, I guess, its own way, its own collection. Because there is a lot of games that besides the multiple versions of Final Fight 1, you also would be able to play literally other games that are mostly locked behind, let's say, specific consoles. Heck, if TMNT Cowabunga Collection allow you to play the Game Boy and even the NES games on a PlayStation and literally on an Xbox, then you could do the same with the Final Fight games, with you to play Final Fight 2, 3, Mighty Fight from the NES, Final Fight Revenge, and a couple of others enlisted here. Except for Streetwise. Streetwise, we don't really count that one. Like that one, that one is a big no one in this case. So before I end this video, I actually asked two specific people who have a big appreciation for the Final Fight series in their own unique way. So the first one that I actually want to introduce is someone that you might be very familiar with. He's done a lot of character moveset history at Capcom versus Legacy and vice versa. Give it up for the Seventh Force.
As a big fan of beat 'em ups, of course I love Final Fight. The first game is a foundational title in the genre, and still holds up as an example of brilliant beat 'em up design even today, with its gritty urban aesthetic, its swarming gangs of enemies, and its focus on managing crowd control. There's other games in the series I enjoy a lot too. Some of the ports from the first game have their own reasons to play them, like Final Fight CD's incredible Red Book audio arranged soundtrack by Sega's Sound Team, or Final Fight's Game Boy Advance port having some absolutely bonkers bonus content, like Street Fighter Alpha Guy and Cody being unlockable characters. Mighty Final Fight is a really cool 8-bit take on the first game, and even Final Fight Revenge and Streetwise have some neat ideas, malign as they are. But while I think the first game is probably objectively the best designed one, my personal favorite game in the series is Final Fight 3. Released late into the Super Nintendo's lifespan, Final Fight 3 is the second of two console-exclusive sequels to the first Final Fight. While Final Fight 2 plays a lot like the first game, almost to a fault, Final Fight 3 feels like an evolution in ways I think the series really needed. Taking place after Final Fight 2, and presumably somewhere in the vicinity of the Street Fighter Alpha games, Final Fight 3 sees the rise of a new gang in Metro City, the Skullcross Gang, who start wreaking havoc across the city. Hagar, still the mayor at this point, is visited by a returning guy who was absent from Final Fight 2 due to training, and Lucia, a cop on Metro City's police force who you might recognize from Street Fighter V. They're also introduced to Dean, a mysterious man fighting against the Skullcross Gang, who reveals he was approached by them to join them, and when he refused, they killed his family. Ouch. Unlike 2's globetrotting adventure, Final Fight 3 takes place in good old Metro City again, spanning a downtown ride at a police station, a bar, Chinatown, and a few other locales. Right off the bat, the first thing you might notice on the title screen is the Auto 2P option, which allows you to play the game in co-op mode along with a CPU-controlled partner. As someone that enjoyed co-op games a lot growing up, but couldn't always get siblings or friends to play with me, options like this are really nice. Yeah, the computer partner isn't very smart, like, at all, but it's still easier than going it alone. Final Fight 3's base combat is very similar to the first game. You have a standard attack string, a throw, an aerial attack, and a get off me Mega Crash attack for each character. However, the movesets are expanded even further this time around. For additional mobility, each character has a dash, done by double tapping forward, a backdash that can be done by double tapping back immediately after a dash, or holding the R button and double tapping back. Characters have a unique attack string that can be done from a dash as well, but the most noteworthy addition are the Street Fighter inspired special moves and supers. Since Final Fight had integrated itself into the Street Fighter universe by this point, it makes sense that it influenced Final Fight a bit mechanically. By inputting a motion, each character has a special attack they can do at no cost. Guy does a short-range fireball, Lucia has an attack similar to Chun-Li's up kicks, and so on. As you fight, a meter at the bottom of the screen fills, and when it's full, you get access to a super move, which also require a motion input, and for all characters except Lucia, a front grapple. Final Fight also borrows a bit from its rival series Streets of Rage, particularly Streets of Rage 3, which notably had a branching path system. In Final Fight 3, depending on what you do in certain parts of certain stages, you can influence what stages you go to throughout the game. For example, In Stage 2, there's 2 possible paths to take. When you get to this fence, you can either fight normally, then continue to the area behind the fence to experience the rest of the level and its boss. But if you decide to break open the entrance to the bar in the background, you can walk inside and instead have a truncated bar section before being able to fight the stage boss earlier than usual. Perhaps the best known example of this is Stage 3. At one point in the stage, there's a bus stop. If it breaks, the stage ends immediately after dispatching all of the enemies in the area, and you go on to a factory stage. If you manage to defeat everyone nearby without breaking the bus stop though, a bus arrives and the stage continues, eventually sending you to an entirely new stage in Chinatown. Some stages even have alternate paths in them that loop back around to the main path within the stages themselves, and some boss fights can be avoided altogether by interacting with background elements in stages. This all affects the game's ending though, which is affected by what bosses you choose to face throughout the game, so keep that in mind. For as amazing as the game is, there are a few downsides. Being held back by the Super Nintendo hardware meant that there's rarely more than 3 or 4 enemies on screen at any given point, and combined with the expanded movesets, it makes for a pretty easy game compared to the first 2, to say nothing of the slowdown that occasionally happens. The screen viewing area is also pretty small, likely a consequence of the slightly more detailed animations and sprites compared to Final Fight 2. It's also not an easy game to find these days. It used to be on Nintendo's Virtual Console services on their older platforms like Wii, Wii U, and new Nintendo 3DS, but hasn't shown up on Nintendo Switch Online, and it's one of the few games on Nintendo's 16-bit platforms that's expensive to own physically both in North America and Japan. If you are able to acquire the game however you do it though, it's easily one of the games in the series worth playing the most, right behind the first game.
And lastly, I have a Bushinryu warrior who basically would love to see Guy and maybe a couple of others in Street Fighter 6, but he is also literally my brother, Skull Ronin, and hear what he basically has to say about, well, his favorite character, Guy.
Thanks, bro. And overall, even though I do appreciate the debut for Kimberly in Street Fighter 6 to be quite good, I still believe that Guy, the Bushinryu ninja in Final Fight, should be in Street Fighter 6 as well. Overall, even people may say, is he gonna be technically an Echo fighter or sorts, or he'd be like different? I think he'll be different. If anything, he'll be probably the first starter to see what Strider could have been in the Street Fighter era. And overall, people will probably tell me, oh, why do you think that way? Well, if you don't remember, in Zeku's story in Street Fighter V, he was making like a new name for his clan, for the Bushinryu, where he came the idea of Strider as one of the names he has chosen for his new clan. So possibly we may see maybe Guy using a sword or sorts, or who knows? Maybe he'll do some crazy references. Like hell, I wouldn't be surprised they will make like a Street Fighter reference with the anime a little bit, or maybe they could do something with like Final Fight Streetwise. I know it's a garbage game, but hey, maybe they'll reference that somehow, or maybe they'll give him a reference where he sees a gun and somebody was like gonna use a gun on him, or he just doesn't want to use a gun. He'd be like, I don't want to use this thing. This thing's no dishonor. This thing has dishonor and stuff like it. Overall, I still feel like Guy has some more important things in the story. I mean, we don't even know what happened with him and Cody. We all know that him and Cody are like somewhat, they're separate. Like they straight up don't either talk to each other. Cody just keeps pushing him away for some reason. Like, we don't know what happened to them after that. It would be pretty interesting to see what happened later on, to see how their friendship will be, will rebond again and everything else. I really want to see them be the duel that used to be back the old days in Final Fight. Who knows? Maybe we'll get Hagar to come out of nowhere as a freaking character in probably the future DLC of Street Fighter 6. But who knows at this point? I mean, everybody knows that we already got Kimberly, and we all know that Guy technically trained her, but overall, she's not really the Bushinryu next successor. That's the guy he's training, and when you see in Kimberly's world tour stuff. But overall, I feel like this would probably be cool if we ever do get a Final Fight DLC pack where you get Hagar, Cody, Guy, and who knows, maybe some returning Final Fight villains like Relento, Poison, Hugo, not Abigail. I'm sorry. I mean, Abigail is whatever, but we all know what happened in Street Fighter 5, guys. We don't need that repeat. Is that really fun? Or who else? Maybe they put a cop in it, and then maybe, oh, I don't know. It could be anything at this point. I mean, hell, Final Fight is full of good characters that we could ever use. Hell, we could freaking get, I don't know, Lucia, and even the other two characters. I know Carlos may no longer be playable though, because, well, he's technically an NPC in World Tour. But still, it'll be pretty cool to see some returning Final Fight characters like Lucia, like I said. The other guy, I forgot his name, but he was in Final Fight 3 though. And then Maki could easily come back too. I mean, I'll be honest. The game, Street Fighter 6 already has a lot of Shotos, like Gakuma, Ryu, Ken. Why not make Ninja Shotos instead too? Like, Kimberly is there, but Guy will always be the #1 first ninja character. Then we will get Zeku possibly, then everything else along the way. Or even a new successor may be a new DLC character for it. But who knows? All I know is that I really hope we do get more stuff for Guy, Final Fight in general, and everything, because they deserve a chance. I mean, hell, if Rival School is coming back in the Street Fighter universe, Final Fight should deserve a chance too. And hopefully along more things along the way, you know? Overall, it'll be pretty cool to even see something else besides Final Fight characters in Street Fighter. Hopefully we'll get even a Final Fight collection. Oh, I know that the Capcom arcade collection technically has Final Fight, but we need our own Final Fight collection for real, because I would love to play Final Fight 1 again, Final Fight 2, Final Fight 3, or hell, Final Fight Revenge could be in it too, for the first time being released in worldwide. And then maybe the last one will get Final Fight Streetwise. I know, it's terrible, but it's still a Final Fight game. I mean, hell, it's kind of funny to see Guy trying to use a gun for crying out loud. Like, seriously. Who knows? Maybe put that in freaking Street Fighter 6 if he ever comes back in the game. Put that as a costume. That'd be pretty cool. Or hell, actually, I forgot to mention, why not put Cody's brother as a character in Street Fighter 6 too? Honestly, that'd be pretty cool to see. Well, who knows? Maybe Shock and I will probably do more sparring match in that damn thing, and he'll be like doing bingo, and then I don't know what the brother may do, but he may do something. But who knows? But overall, it will be pretty cool to see more things with Final Fight coming along the way, like I said. I know I keep repeating it, but I just love Final Fight a lot, just as much as my brother Shockbrawler does. Because it impacted so much in our lives and how much we love these characters, and we just wish the story for them could actually be sort of continuing alongside with everything else. Well, that's a maybe in the future if Capcom is willing to do it, but who knows. Anyway, we'll see what will come for the upcoming future for everything else.
See, I can understand that Capcom is really busy with Street Fighter 6, with Year 2, and hopefully Year 3 with more characters. Dead Rising, Remaster, Resident Evil, and a bunch of other things. But I really do hope at some point that they actually do give love to literally Final Fight, especially for us Final Fight fans, because we really have been waiting for a brand new game. And honestly, I wouldn't even be too discouraged if it's like a remake or a continuous sequel where I guess maybe Street Fighter 5 and parts of Street Fighter 6 is sort of teasing about. But in all honesty, I just really want to see something new with Final Fight. It's one of the most beloved franchises that Capcom has ever put out, and it would be a real shame that in the future we don't get anything new until, like, who knows, another 10 years or something. And with that ends today's video with me talking about Final Fight in general. I mean, again, outside of the cameos and being able to be as characters in Street Fighter, I truly do hope that Final Fight does get a chance to really be able to be its own thing, and at least be able to truly give something for us old-time fans, and even some new fans who probably never have played the originals, a chance to truly see why we love this series entirely. But hey, it's going to be up to Capcom to see if there's going to be anything new at this point. But until then, this is Shockbrawler, hanging out in Metro City, signing out. See ya!